The ocean breeze carried their voices across the empty beach, sharp and hostile, against the gentle lap of waves. I wasn't meant to hear them, but there I stood, barefoot in my wedding dress, frozen behind the wooden pavilion, where hours ago Ryan had promised to love me forever. She'll never fit in with our family, and you know it. Laura's voice cut through the darkness. A foster child. Really, Ryan? What were you thinking? Mother, enough. I married Elizabeth because you're rebelling, just like when you were 16 and dated that waitress to spite me. But this isn't a teenage fling. This is marriage. I pressed my hands against the rough wood, my wedding ring catching the moonlight. The same ring Ryan had slipped onto my finger with tears in his eyes, promising me a lifetime of happiness. Now he stood silent while his mother tore apart everything we were supposed to be. Give it time, Ryan said finally, his voice weak. Elizabeth is different. Different? Laura laughed, the sound like breaking glass. That's precisely the problem. She's not one of us, never will be. Did you see how she handled the wine selection at dinner? Completely clueless. My cheeks burned. I'd chosen the wine I thought tasted best, not the most expensive one. Such a simple thing, but in Laura's world, every choice was a test I seemed destined to fail. She's smart, Mother, a successful translator, a glorified secretary who plays with words. Is that what you want? Someone who works for a living when she should be managing charity galas and upholding our family's reputation? The silence that followed hurt more than any words could. Ryan, my husband of 8 hours, didn't defend me. Didn't tell his mother that love mattered more than social status. Didn't mention how David and Susan, my foster parents, had given me more love and support than money could buy. What do you expect me to do? Ryan's voice had changed, becoming smaller, more uncertain, like a child seeking approval. Nothing drastic, not yet, but remember, darling, prenuptial agreements can be very useful things, especially when certain parties prove unsuitable. My fingers curled into fists, pristine French manicure digging into my palms. The pain helped me focus, helped me push back the tears threatening to spill. I thought of David and Susan, how they'd welcomed me into their home when I was 12, scared and defensive after years of being shuffled between foster homes. They'd taught me that family meant unconditional love, not social climbing and manipulation. I should get back, Ryan said. Elizabeth will wonder where I am. Of course, darling. Go play house with your little charity case, but remember what I said. Their footsteps faded in opposite directions, leaving me alone with the truth I'd been too blind to see. The perfect wedding, the elaborate honeymoon suite, the champagne toasts. It had all been a beautiful lie, a facade hiding the rot beneath. I slipped off my heels and walked toward the water, letting the cold waves wash over my feet. The expensive wedding dress, chosen by Laura, of course, dragged in the wet sand. I didn't care anymore. My phone buzzed in the hidden pocket Susan had insisted on adding to the dress. A text from Daniel, my boss. Hope the wedding was everything you dreamed of. Remember, your job will always be here for you. I stared at the message, something shifting inside me. Daniel had always seen my potential, had promoted me based on merit rather than background. In his world, I wasn't a charity case or a social climber. I was simply Elizabeth, valued for who I was. The waves retreated, leaving my feet buried in the sand. Trapped, just like I'd trapped myself in this marriage. But unlike the sand, this trap wasn't permanent, not if I decided to fight back. I looked up at the resort's gleaming windows, knowing somewhere behind them, Ryan waited in our honeymoon suite, probably rehearsing excuses for his absence. Let him wait, I had planning to do. 3 weeks after the wedding, I sat in David and Susan's kitchen, watching steam rise from my untouched coffee. The familiar scent of hops from their brewery drifted through the open window, a reminder of simpler times. You're not eating, sweetheart. Susan pushed a plate of scones closer. These are your favorite. I forced a smile. Just tired. The charity gala Laura's organizing is taking up all my free time. Ah, yes, the famous hospital fundraiser. David's voice carried an edge I rarely heard. The one Ryan's mother insisted you help plan, despite your full-time job. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. I hadn't told them about the conversation I'd overheard at the beach, hadn't admitted that my marriage was already crumbling under the weight of Laura's expectations. My phone buzzed. Another text from Ryan. Mother needs the final guest list by tonight. Don't embarrass us. Elizabeth. Susan's hand covered mine. What's really going on? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. David went to answer it, and moments later, Laura swept into the kitchen like she owned it, designer heels clicking against the worn tiles. Elizabeth, darling, I thought I might find you here. Her smile never reached her eyes. Shouldn't you be working on the seating arrangements? Susan straightened, her warmth vanishing. We're having a family breakfast. How quaint. Laura's gaze swept over the modest kitchen. But Elizabeth has responsibilities now, real ones. I gripped my coffee mug harder. I submitted the seating chart yesterday. And it was completely wrong. You put the mayor's wife next to her husband's former mistress. Laura sighed dramatically. These are things you should know, dear. Social awareness is crucial in our circles. I wasn't aware I needed a degree in local affairs to arrange dinner seats. Laura's eyes narrowed at my tone. Ryan mentioned you've been difficult lately. I assumed it was wedding stress, but perhaps it's something else. The threat in her voice was clear. I thought of the prenup she'd mentioned, of Ryan's silence that night on the beach. Actually, I said, standing up, I've been meaning to ask about the donation records for the gala. Some numbers don't add up. For a split second, Laura's composure cracked. What numbers? The ones from last year's event. Daniel's company was listed as a major donor, but he says they never received a tax receipt. Your boss should mind his own business. Laura's voice turned sharp, and so should you. David stepped forward. Is there a problem with the charity's accounts, Laura? Of course not. Just a clerical error, I'm sure. She turned to me, all pretense of warmth gone. Ryan's waiting at home. Don't make him wait too long. Marriage requires attention. After she left, Susan hugged me tight. That woman's hiding something. I know. I pulled back, my mind racing, and I'm going to find out what it is. That evening, I returned home to find Ryan in his study, surrounded by work papers. He barely looked up when I entered. Mother says you were asking about the charity records. Shouldn't I be interested in our family's philanthropic work? He finally met my eyes. Some things are better left alone, Elizabeth. Like your mother's comments about me at our wedding. Ryan's face paled. You heard that? I heard everything. I moved closer, watching his reaction, including your silence. It's complicated. No, it's really not. I picked up one of his papers, a financial report for the hospital charity. What's complicated is these numbers. They don't match the public records. Put that down. Ryan snatched the paper away. You're out of your depth. I smiled, thinking of Daniel's text from earlier. Found something interesting in the charity's tax filings. Come see me tomorrow. Maybe I am, I said, turning to leave. Or maybe I'm exactly where I need to be. Ryan called after me, but I was already walking away, my mind clear for the first time in weeks. Laura thought she could break me with her social games and subtle threats. She didn't realize that growing up in foster care had taught me something valuable. Sometimes the best defense is a carefully planned offense. I pulled out my phone and texted Daniel. Meeting tomorrow confirmed. Bring everything you have. Daniel spread the documents across his desk, each paper another nail in Laura's carefully constructed coffin. The hospital charity's been a front for years. Money goes in, but only half makes it to actual medical equipment. I traced the flow of numbers, my hands trembling. Where's the rest going? Private accounts, shell companies. He tapped a statement. Most of it ends up here. An offshore trust in Ryan's name. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Not just Laura's corruption, but Ryan's involvement. All those nights he'd worked late, claiming to be managing charitable donations. He'd been helping his mother steal from sick children. My phone buzzed, Laura's number. I declined the call, but her text came through anyway. Ryan tells me you've been meeting with Daniel. Remember your place, dear. Daniel watched me carefully. There's more. The development project Ryan's been working on. Laura's been sabotaging it behind the scenes. She's making sure he fails. Why would she hurt her own son? Control. If he succeeds, he might break free. But if he fails... Daniel's voice trailed off as my phone buzzed again. This time it was Ryan. Where are you? Mother's furious about the gala seating changes. I stood up, my decision crystallizing. I need copies of everything. Elizabeth. Daniel's tone made me pause. Be careful. Laura's dangerous when cornered. I arrived home to find Laura waiting in our living room, Ryan standing by the window like a scolded child. Emergency board meeting tomorrow, Laura announced without preamble. Ryan's project is being reviewed. Apparently, someone raised concerns about financial irregularities. Ryan's head snapped up. What? That's impossible. Unless, Laura cut in, someone's been talking to the wrong people. Her eyes fixed on me. Like certain employees at rival firms. I don't know what you're talking about. I kept my voice steady, thinking of the documents in my bag. No? Laura stood, smoothing her designer dress. Then you won't mind explaining why you've been meeting with Daniel. He's quite interested in our family's business lately. Daniel's my boss. We discuss work. Your work is translation, not finance. She moved closer. Stay in your lane, Elizabeth. Some roads are too dangerous for newcomers. Ryan finally spoke. Elizabeth, whatever you think you know, I know enough. I cut him off, pulling out one of Daniel's documents. Like how the children's ward never got those new ventilators, but you bought a yacht last month. Laura's composure cracked. Where did you get that? The same place I got proof of Ryan's offshore accounts, and records of how you've been sabotaging his career to keep him dependent on you. Ryan grabbed the paper, his face draining of color. Mother, is this true? Of course not. But Laura's voice wavered. She's trying to turn you against me, just like I warned you she would. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my ears. You did that yourself, Laura. I'm just exposing the truth. Truth? Laura's eyes turned cold. Here's truth. Ryan's filing for divorce. Aren't you, darling? The silence stretched. I watched my husband, the man I'd loved, the man I'd thought loved me, struggle with his mother's leash. I'm sorry, he whispered finally. Mother knows best. Does she? I pulled out my phone, showing them the email I'd just sent. Because the hospital board might disagree. They're very interested in where their donations went. Laura lunged for my phone, but I stepped back. That's just the beginning. By tomorrow, every news outlet in the city will have copies of everything. Your reputation, your social standing, your precious family name, all gone. You wouldn't dare, Laura hissed. You'll destroy Ryan too. You already did that. I turned to my husband. You just never let him see it. I walked out, leaving them with their crumbling lies. In my bag, Daniel's documents felt like weapons, which I supposed they were. Laura had taught me well. In her world, information was power, and now I had enough to burn her empire to the ground. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. You okay, sweetheart? I wasn't. Not yet, but I would be. Because Laura had forgotten something crucial about people who grow up in foster care. We learn early that family isn't about blood, it's about loyalty. And I'd just discovered exactly where everyone's loyalties lay. The morning headline screamed across my phone screen. Local hospital charity under investigation. Below it, a smaller headline. Business mogul Laura Harrison steps down from board. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, my hands shook as I read Ryan's latest text. You have no idea what you've started. I deleted it without responding and headed to work, only to find my office door locked. Daniel waited nearby, his expression grim. Board meeting in 10 minutes. Laura's lawyers are here. Already? I straightened my spine, remembering the backup files hidden in 3 different locations. They're claiming defamation and, he hesitated, Ryan's supporting their case. Of course he was. I'd expected the legal threats, but something in Daniel's tone made me pause. What aren't you telling me? Before he could answer, his assistant rushed in. They're asking for you both, now. The boardroom felt like a trap. Laura sat at the head of the table, immaculate as ever, while Ryan stood by the window. But it was the third person who made my blood freeze, Susan. Elizabeth? Laura's smile was razor-sharp. Thank you for joining us. I believe you know Ryan's private investigator. Susan met my eyes, her familiar warmth replaced by professional detachment. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. The room tilted. Susan, my foster mother, my rock, had been working for them all along. Quite the thorough investigation, Laura continued. Every meeting, every phone call, every document you accessed, all carefully documented. I gripped the back of a chair. Why? Insurance, Ryan said quietly. Mother always has insurance. Susan pulled out a folder. Elizabeth's foster care records, including sealed juvenile documents about a fire at her 3rd foster home. My chest tightened. That fire, an accident, ruled inconclusive. I'd been 12, angry, lost. No charges filed, but the whispers had followed me until David and Susan took me in. Or so I'd thought. You were never just foster parents, were you? The words tasted like ash. We loved you, Susan whispered. That was real, but Laura hired us to monitor potential threats to Ryan's future. Daniel stepped forward. This is harassment. This, Laura cut in, is protection. Elizabeth here thinks she can destroy my family. I've been destroying threats to my son's happiness for decades. Happiness? I laughed, the sound brittle. You call this happiness? I call it survival. Laura stood. Now, here's what happens next. You'll retract your allegations about the charity. Claim it was a misunderstanding. Then you'll accept a generous divorce settlement and disappear. Or those sealed records become very public, along with some interesting theories about that fire. The media loves a scandal. Imagine the headlines about Ryan's unstable, potentially dangerous wife. I looked at Susan, seeing years of shared memories crumble. Was anything real? Everything that mattered. Her voice cracked. But Laura has evidence that could hurt David's brewery, our retirement, our employees' livelihoods. Enough. Daniel's voice cut through the tension. Elizabeth, don't say another word. This meeting's over. I walked out, my legs somehow carrying me despite the weight crushing my chest. Behind me, I heard Ryan call my name, but I kept moving. In Daniel's office, I finally broke. They had Susan watching me for years. Everything I thought I knew. Listen carefully. Daniel lowered his voice. Laura's not the only one with insurance. Remember that project I mentioned? About Ryan's development deals? I wiped my eyes, focusing. What about it? There's something they don't know we found. Something bigger than charity fraud. He slid a USB drive across his desk. Laura's not the only one who's been planning ahead. I stared at the drive, thinking of Susan's betrayal, of Ryan's cowardice, of Laura's endless manipulation. They thought they could bury me with my past. Fine, let them try. Because they'd forgotten something crucial, that angry 12-year-old girl they were threatening to expose. She survived. She learned. And now she had nothing left to lose. I picked up the drive, feeling its weight like a weapon in my palm. Tell me everything. The USB drive Daniel gave me contained something far worse than charity fraud. Development contracts, shell companies, and buried deep in the data, evidence of environmental violations that would destroy not just Laura's reputation, but her entire empire. I sat in my hotel room, surrounded by printouts and laptop screens, when someone knocked. Through the peephole, I saw David, alone. Elizabeth. His voice carried none of its usual warmth. Please, 5 minutes. I opened the door but kept the chain on. Did Susan send you? No, she doesn't know I'm here. He looked older, tired. Can we talk? Inside, he studied the papers scattered across the bed. You're really going through with this? They gave me no choice. There's always a choice. He picked up a document. These development projects, they're not just Laura's, are they? No. I watched his face carefully. The brewery's expansion, the new location Laura helped you secure, it's built on contaminated land. She knew, David. She knew, and she let you sink your retirement into it. He sank into a chair. Why would she? Insurance. Like everything else. I handed him the soil reports. One anonymous tip to the environmental agency, and you lose everything. She owns you, just like she owns Ryan. And you're going to expose it all? Tomorrow night, at the charity gala. I smiled without humor. Laura's last big social event before her temporary retirement from the board. It'll destroy us, all of us. You destroyed me first. The words came out sharper than intended. Or did you forget that part? My phone buzzed, Ryan calling again. I declined it, but not before David saw his name. He's been asking about you. Says he wants to explain. There's nothing to explain. I turned to the window, watching the city lights blur. He chose his side long ago. So did Susan. So did you. We loved you. David's voice cracked. Whatever else happened, that was real. Was it? Or was I just another investment? A backup plan in case Laura needed leverage? The silence answered for him. My phone buzzed again. A text from Daniel. Board meeting moved up, tomorrow morning. Laura's making her move. You should go, I told David. Plausible deniability. When this breaks tomorrow night. Elizabeth. He stood, suddenly looking more like the father I remembered. What if there's another way? What if... Don't. I held up my hand. Whatever Laura's offering, whatever deal she's dangling, it's too late. She'll destroy you, your past, your career. My past? I laughed. That fire they're threatening to expose. It wasn't an accident. But it wasn't me either. It was my foster brother, the one they sent away, the one nobody believed. I met David's eyes. I learned then what happens when powerful people write the narrative. I won't let it happen again. His phone chimed, Susan calling. He stared at it, torn between two loyalties. Go home, David. Hold Susan. Remember what it felt like to be good people. I turned back to my work. Tomorrow, everyone's true nature gets exposed. After he left, I opened Daniel's file on Ryan's development projects. The contamination wasn't just environmental, it was human. Displaced families, destroyed communities, all sacrificed for profit. Laura's legacy of destruction, wrapped in charity galas and social prestige. My phone buzzed one last time. Laura. Final chance. Walk away now, or I release everything. I thought of that 12-year-old girl, watching her foster brother taken away for a crime he didn't commit. Thought of Susan's betrayal, Ryan's weakness, Laura's endless manipulation. Release it, I typed back. Tomorrow I release everything too. Let's see whose truth survives. I turned back to my preparations for the gala. Laura thought she was protecting her son, her legacy, her perfect world. She didn't understand that some people, pushed too far, stop caring about protection. Some people just want to watch carefully constructed lies burn. Tomorrow, we'd all learn what happens when the powerless finally gain power. When the watched become the watchers. When revenge stops being about justice and becomes something darker, deeper, more complete. I picked up my phone one last time, sending a single text to Daniel. It's time. Release the first wave. The game was changing. Let them scramble to protect themselves. By tomorrow night, there would be nothing left to protect. The charity gala glittered with false promises, just like everything else in Laura's world. I adjusted my midnight blue gown, borrowed from the costume department at Daniel's firm, and watched the security feed on my phone. Laura stood at the podium, practicing her speech about community service and family values. Everything's in place. Daniel appeared beside me, champagne glasses in hand. The press is here. Environmental inspectors are standing by. One word from you. Elizabeth. Ryan's voice froze me. He stood in the doorway of the empty conference room, looking lost in his expensive suit. You need to leave. Daniel stepped forward, but I touched his arm. It's fine. Give us a minute. After Daniel left, Ryan moved closer. You're really going through with this? Funny. David asked the same thing. I saw him yesterday. He told me about the contaminated land. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. Mother says she can fix it. Make it go away. Like she made me go away. That's not... He stopped, frustrated. I loved you. Part of me still does. Part of you? I laughed. That's the problem, Ryan. You've never been whole, just fragments of whatever your mother wanted you to be. My phone buzzed. A text from Susan. Please don't do this. We can find another way. They're scared, Ryan said, watching me delete the message. We all are. You have no idea what Mother's capable of. Actually, I do. I pulled up the environmental report. Did you know about the cancer cluster and that development you built? The one Mother helped cover up? His face went pale. Those reports were sealed. Like my juvenile records? I moved closer. Your mother's not the only one who knows how to dig up secrets. The ballroom speakers crackled. Laura's introduction beginning. Ryan grabbed my arm. Whatever you're planning, stop, please. For what we had was a lie. I pulled away. Everything was a lie. I headed for the ballroom, but Ryan's next word stopped me. She'll release the truth about the fire. Let her. Not your truth, his truth. Ryan's voice dropped. Your foster brother. Mother found him. He's willing to change his story. Say you were responsible. That he covered for you back then. The world tilted. You're lying. Check your phone. A video message waited. My foster brother, older now, haunted. Speaking Laura's scripted words about that night, about protecting me, about finally telling the truth. How much? My voice sounded distant. How much did she pay him? Enough to destroy your life instead of his. The ballroom erupted in applause, Laura beginning her speech about family legacy and charitable works. My phone showed Daniel's message. Now, Ryan stepped closer. Walk away. Take the settlement. Start over somewhere else. I thought of that scared 12-year-old girl, watching her only friend taken away. Thought of Susan's years of surveillance, David's compromised brewery, Ryan's weak love, all of Laura's perfectly orchestrated destruction. You know what's funny? I turned to Ryan. Your mother thinks she's protecting you, but she's just teaching you to be afraid. I walked into the ballroom as Laura reached her crescendo about family values. The USB drive felt heavy in my clutch. Now, I texted Daniel. The screens behind Laura flickered. Environmental reports appeared. Financial records. The cancer cluster data. Laura's voice faltered as photographs of displaced families filled the displays. What is this? She tried to maintain control. Technical difficulties? No, Laura. My voice carried across the suddenly silent room. This is truth. Your legacy. Security moved toward me, but stopped as reporters started shouting questions. Laura's face contorted with rage. Remove her. Before you do, I raised my voice. Ask your beloved chairwoman about the contaminated land she sold to local businesses. Ask about the families she destroyed. Ask about... The lights went out. In the chaos that followed, I felt someone grab my arm. Ryan's voice in the darkness. Mother says thank you for making this easy. The backup generators hummed to life, but it was too late. The screens were dark. My phone was dead. And Laura stood triumphant, tears in her eyes, playing the victim perfectly. I'm so sorry, she addressed the crowd. It seems my daughter-in-law's troubled past has finally caught up with her. Security, please escort her out, and someone call the police. I looked for Daniel, but he was gone. In my moment of revenge, I'd forgotten Laura's first rule. Always control the narrative. The handcuffs felt cold against my wrists as Laura's carefully crafted story began to unfold. The holding cell's fluorescent lights buzzed like Laura's accusations in my head. 3 hours of questioning, and still no sign of Daniel. My phone, my evidence, everything, gone. The door opened. Not the detective this time, but Laura. Perfect as ever in her charity gala dress. Comfortable? She settled into the metal chair, smoothing her silk skirt. I brought your medication records. From when you were 12. Such a troubled child. Where's Daniel? Resigned. Effective immediately. She smiled thinly. Something about family emergency overseas. He left quite abruptly. My stomach dropped. Daniel had abandoned me too. The press is having a field day. Laura examined her manicure. Unstable foster child attacks respected philanthropist. Claims conspiracy. Very sad, really. The cell door opened again. Ryan entered, carrying a manila envelope. The papers are ready, Mother. Excellent. Laura slid them across the table. Full divorce settlement. Very generous, considering your episode. Sign now, and these unfortunate charges disappear. I stared at the envelope, remembering the night I'd heard them on the beach. You planned this from the beginning. Please, Laura waved dismissively. You planned your own destruction. I merely provided the stage. And the audience? I met Ryan's eyes. Was that your idea or hers? He wouldn't look at me. Just sign, Elizabeth. End this. Like you ended those families' lives, the ones who got cancer from your contaminated development. Alleged contamination. Laura's voice hardened. Unproven claims from unreliable sources. The cell door opened a third time. A guard entered with Susan. You have 5 minutes, he said, leaving us. Susan looked destroyed, tears tracking her makeup. Elizabeth, please, sign the papers. David's at the hospital, his heart. Stop. The pieces clicked together. David was fine yesterday. Stress can do terrible things. Laura stood, especially to someone facing environmental violations, bankruptcy, potential criminal charges. Unless I sign. Smart girl. Laura nodded to Ryan. You almost had me worried at the gala. Almost made me believe you'd learned something about power. She leaned closer. But you forgot the most important lesson. I never play just one game. My foster brother's video confession. David's sudden illness. Daniel's disappearance. All carefully orchestrated moves in Laura's grand performance. I reached for the pen. Wait. Susan's voice cracked. There's something you should know. Susan. Laura's warning was sharp. No. Susan straightened. I've watched you destroy enough lives, Laura, including your own son's. Ryan started. Mother, what is she? 25 years ago, Susan continued, Laura had another charity, another cover-up, another family destroyed. Laura moved with surprising speed, but Susan was faster. She pulled out her phone, playing a video I'd never seen. A younger Laura, speaking to someone off camera. The adoption records are sealed. He'll never know you existed. My son will have everything, the right name, the right future. Your sacrifice ensures that. Ryan staggered back. What sacrifice? Your real mother, Susan said quietly. The waitress Laura mentioned at the wedding. She wasn't just some girl you dated. She was your birth mother trying to find you. The holding cell erupted in chaos. Ryan lunged for the phone. Laura screamed for guards. But through it all, I watched Susan, my foster mother, Laura's spy, and apparently something more. The fire investigation, I said, understanding finally dawning. You weren't watching me for Laura. You were protecting me from her. Susan nodded, tears falling. Because 25 years ago, I was that waitress's best friend. I watched Laura destroy her. I couldn't let it happen again. The guards burst in, but it was too late. The truth had broken Laura's perfect narrative. Ryan's face showed the devastation of a lifetime of lies unraveling. I picked up the divorce papers and tore them in half. You're right, Laura. I did forget something about power. I met her furious gaze. Sometimes it's not about who has the most weapons. It's about who has the truth. Guards! Laura's composure shattered. "Arrest them all!" But Ryan stepped between us. "No, Mother. No more lies. No more games." He turned to me. "I want to know everything." Laura's carefully constructed world crumbled around her as Susan's phone continued playing, revealing decades of buried truths. And in that moment, I realized, sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's forcing them to face themselves. The morning newspaper lay on my desk at Daniel's old firm, my firm now. The headline still drew stares from passing employees. "Harrison Empire crumbles. CEO Laura Harrison faces federal charges." I traced the smaller headline below. "Environmental scandal claims multiple victims. Whistleblower Daniel Chen named posthumously." The door opened. Ryan entered, looking older in his casual clothes, so different from his former polished self. "They found Mother's offshore accounts. The prosecutor says she'll likely take a plea deal." "And your birth mother? Flying in tomorrow." He fidgeted with his wedding ring, still wearing it, though we both knew our marriage was over. "Susan's helping me prepare. Says she kept letters, photos, everything Mother hid." My phone buzzed. David out of the hospital and back at the brewery. The environmental violations had been traced to Laura's shell companies, clearing him of wrongdoing. Another piece of justice, falling into place. "Daniel knew, didn't he?" Ryan's voice was quiet. "About everything." I opened my drawer, pulling out Daniel's last letter, delivered by his sister after they found his car. Laura destroyed his family's business 20 years ago. He spent his career gathering evidence, building connections. I met Ryan's eyes. He hired me because of my background, knew I'd recognize the patterns. "He used you. He gave me the weapons I needed, just like Susan gave you the truth you needed." Ryan sank into a chair. "I keep thinking about that night at the beach, our wedding night. If I'd just stood up to her then." "We can't change the past." I stood, gathering my things. "But we can choose how it shapes us." The elevator ride down felt final. Outside, Susan waited by her car. "Ready?" she asked. "Almost." I turned to Ryan. "Your mother was right about one thing. I never belonged in her world. Elizabeth, but she was wrong about power." I handed him an envelope. "These are copies of everything, the evidence, the accounts, the connections. Use them to rebuild something better than what she destroyed." Susan touched my arm. "David's waiting. The brewery's evening crowd always needs an extra hand." Ryan stepped forward. "I did love you, in my way." "I know. That's what made it hurt more." The drive to the brewery was quiet until Susan spoke. "You're really giving up the firm? It was never about the power." I watched the city fade into familiar streets. Daniel taught me that revenge isn't just about destruction. Sometimes it's about rebuilding. The brewery's lights glowed warm against the dusk. David stood in the doorway, looking stronger, more himself. Through the windows, I could see the regular crowd. People who worked hard, loved deeply, lived honestly. My phone buzzed one last time. A news alert. "Laura Harrison accepts plea deal. Son to testify." I deleted it without reading further. "You know," Susan said as we walked toward the entrance, "when Laura first hired us to watch you, she said damaged people never truly heal. And now I think some damage makes us stronger, if we choose to build something new from the broken pieces." Inside, David handed me an apron. The familiar weight settled around my waist as conversations and laughter filled the air. No crystal champagne flutes or charity galas here. Just real people, real connections, real life. "Table 6 needs menus," David said, then paused. "Welcome home, kiddo." I moved through the crowd, notepad ready, remembering the frightened foster child who once thought belonging meant fitting into someone else's world. Laura had tried to break me by exposing my past, never understanding that our pasts don't define us. Our choices do. A young girl sat at table 6, watching her foster parents study the menu with anxious eyes. I recognized that look, the fear of temporary love, of conditional belonging. First time here? I asked, offering her a genuine smile. She nodded, relaxing slightly. Well then, I said, let me tell you about our house specials. Sometimes revenge isn't about making others pay. Sometimes it's about proving them wrong. And sometimes, healing comes not from destroying the past, but from building a future strong enough to withstand it. I opened my notepad, ready to take their order, ready to begin again.